J-Lord's playing with noises, and we got, I asked for the bruh button.
Bruh.
Get 2 of them, right?
It's like a
Why'd you
kid in
turn
a
it
candy
down
store.
so much? Give me the
Bruh.
There it is. That's the one.
That's the one. Yes. Well, thank you for hosting us, Titan of security industry.
You've been waiting for
All
that.
fucking day.
Waiting
All day.
for that.
Yeah.
You know, if our partners said that, so I can't help what our partners say. So
They mean very well. And so
that's not the word I would use to describe me, especially at being 5'6" and 100 and whatever pounds I am. Titan's not the word.
so obligatory upfront stuff. Subscribe, like. We also have a Instagram handle and Twitter X, whatever the name of it is this week.
Yeah, we need a social media
And
manager.
we're currently hiring.
Yeah, and we need interns. Any interns?
Yeah, $100 a year salary. The market's saturated right now. We'll put that up post it in our YouTube channel as well when we put this episode up.
Yeah, cool. You know, aside from, you know, people posting on YouTube, which nobody does, I don't like. There's no real feedback there. The response that we've gotten from folks that have listened and have personally reached out and said, first off, like for this being your first and second set of podcasts, you're better than any security podcast I've listened to. That's a direct quote. I've been in the industry for a long time, and the way you guys, the authenticity of you guys is interesting to listen to, which, like, you don't want to do a boring podcast, which is great. Most of the security ones I've listened to are, because we keep it reals over here. That was really cool. And then lastly, what I heard was like, I can't wait to see where this goes, given the creativity of what you've done and how you've done it. What did Sean Riley say? Like, I was talking about doing a podcast too, but you guys already beat me to it.
Yeah, got there first.
So got there first, and we're one of hundreds of podcasts that are out there. So.
This is all because there's way too many people unemployed sitting on the bench right now. So
touche.
This is my way of introducing everyone. Getting again plugging the Tech Fellow guys.
That's right. There's jobs there. You just got to find them.
And it's how our industry works. So
yeah,
it's been working really well.
Totally.
Back to the subscribers. Shout out to our #1 subscriber for both episodes. Some creep following us, Ari Reiser. So
whoever that is.
Yeah, whoever that is. Anyways, let's get into it.
Well, but before we leave that one, shout out also to our sommelier today, or
we have
bartender.
We have a bartender / mixologist, my favorite chef on the planet. We have local grown mint juleps by Mike Lord. No relation? Some relation? I don't know.
Mike's got a cool story. Like we got to talk about that for a second. Mike don't want to be on the show yet because he's social media aware. Good on him for that.
Yeah.
Well done, Jay.
Good job.
But like, cool kid. Like, grew up, went to CIA, doing, about to become a chef. Don't let me spill all the beans.
We've been knocking him around for years.
Yeah.
He's a stand-up kid. Smart, good head on his shoulders. Can fight. And shoot.
Thanks to who?
I watched you teach him personally.
He broke my glasses in my back at the pool the other day. So,
so yeah, everything's good. Everyone's broken something on you.
That's true. You too. You're right here.
Yeah, exactly. So, speaking of guests, and of course, Greg Lai, the greatest producer in Connecticut podcasting history,
no doubt,
was here. But we have another guest in studio today, someone else that we've been beating up on for years.
Yeah. So Ethan Johnson is a very good, close personal friend of mine. Worked with me back in our days at one of the funds. Worked adjacently with
me
you.
Too, yeah.
We were all there, right? And he had several jobs. But don't let me intro you better than you can intro you, Ethan. Like, tell our listening community who you are.
Real quick before we do that.
Yeah.
Did you have a real desk or did you sit at a picnic table?
That's a super inside joke.
I don't know if I want to answer that.
All right. The floor is yours, Ethan.
So yeah, I met you guys. It's pushing like almost 10 years now, right?
Is it 10 years, really?
Yeah, 2014,
14,
2013,
9 years.
somewhere around that.
Jesus Christ, that's right. You worked for JB back in the day, right?
Yes.
And then he left, and you ended up a free agent. That's how I got hold of it.
I figured, why not go to that place and use that as the environment to try to learn a new area?
Yeah,
It's completely
cool.
new. And
Yeah.
bump around like an idiot. And
You worked on like the client side of securing, a client service function within one of
Yes.
the funds. Yeah.
yeah, I hopped over. It was supposed to be like a 4-person team with a manager, but had actually gotten some experience already in the space.
Yeah. So you're telling,
then-
and it wasn't like that at all, was it?
And then he bailed 6 months later, and
Like every job I've ever had. That's
they
right.
said, "Oh, just go figure it out." And I said, "Figure what out? I
Right.
don't know what this even means."
Well, zoom
was
out.
fun.
Like give our listeners kind of a top down view of kind of your experience in the security industry. Just 30 seconds worth. We're gonna spoiler alert. Like Ethan's done some really really cool shit in his career. It's the reason why we brought him on the show, specifically in the crypto space. So we're gonna spend a lot of time a little later, but to get to know Ethan, what's the spectrum of your career look like?
So you used that chance to basically get my foot in the door with you guys around. Basically absorbed everything I could for half a decade or so.
Yeah.
Started to outgrow being in one of those junior roles and realized that it was an environment that wasn't really looking to promote that many people.
Right. Right.
So made the jump, and it was perfect timing for the crypto industry.
Right.
If you remember back to like 2017, there was that first boom.
Yeah.
It hit like 20,000.
Some of our peers made millions of dollars and almost retired and stuff, just hanging out, like doing that stuff.
I'm kind of sitting there going, I want to start moving upward. I want to find something new. I want to take on a challenge. And why not just jump in?
Yeah.
Like, it's already dangerous enough. It's already difficult enough. Why get involved in something where, it goes wrong and you funded North Korea?
Right.
You got like the treasury coming down on you or something, terrible is going to happen.
So for as long as crypto's been around, how long have you been in it?
It's about 5 years now. Out of
7, 6, 7? I mean, maybe
technically, Bitcoin launched 2009, but it wasn't until around
mainstream.
Yeah, it was 2-3 years before it was even picking up. If you remember Silk Road and all that stuff,
Yeah.
that was they were using Bitcoin for transacting, and
Sure.
that got broken up in I think it was 2013,
Right.
and that was one of those first uses. And that around those times, that was when you saw those first exchanges coming online. Because as much as it's great to have a coin, if you can't pull it out or have the on ramps and off ramps,
Yeah.
what are you going to do with it?
That's right. That's right. But when the common man got a hold of it, common man and woman got a hold of it, and became millionaires quickly, like all of a sudden the security part of it mattered, and that's when you jumped right into the industry.
Absolutely. And you saw a few interesting sides of that. One is, criminal enterprises, they jumped on it quick because way in the beginning, the FBI didn't have anyone trained up on this.
Right.
The Treasury, all those areas.
That's common
they
in
couldn't
a lot of
track
law
it.
enforcement. It's even more so. Like there's a layer of technology where law enforcement has difficulty both with the U.S. laws that we have and what it means to actually prosecute and what it means to be anonymous and things like that. And then on top of that, you get this new crypto thing that nobody really understands.
Yeah, so when you realize there's a low rate of enforcement of getting caught, you double down on using it at first.
Yeah.
And, the folks that were using it, as things sort of caught up, they got more crafty.
But
If you want.
your work was more on the the professional, like non-criminal side, obviously, in terms of how the mainstream of crypto use was becoming an actual currency. And so, people that cared about protecting their crypto investment as a diversification
Yes,
became real.
So I've done a combination. I did do about a year at an actual software company that didn't actually do anything holding or transacting with funds. And they're still going. They're going strong. They're working on like blockchain languages and that sort of world. Like they have allegedly the easiest to use smart contract language, which
Yeah.
it's not a bad thing.
Right.
Because there's a whole world of ecosystems that have to get developed and evolved and matured in those spaces.
Right.
But then the majority of it, it's been in finance, small finance, big finance. And getting to go through some of those interesting turns and curves of just watching what goes well, what goes wrong.
Cool.
And it's that world of also, you're hearing about how much money is getting thrown into AI right now. The VCs weren't doing that 4 years ago, 5 years ago. They were
Right.
dumping it into crypto.
The convergence of crypto and AI are turning into like a huge monetization opportunity that people are jumping on. First, we got to talk about old news.
Hi.
Dun, 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 dun. Like old news, Elon versus Zuckerberg.
Yeah.
For the record, where do we stand?
So I'm still Team Zuck.
Where are you, Ethan? Team Zuck, team Elon.
I think Elon.
Now, two to one. Who's got the money? Greg?
Elon.
3 to 1.
Mike?
He worked for him though, so like you got to expect those loyalties.
Yeah.
Well, like I sent you in the mail, New York.
He drives one of those, whatever they're called.
The New York Times already, gave it what did the Simpson sisters say? Forfeit, the sweetest kind of victory.
Yeah.
Didn't they? That's what they reported that Zuckerberg forfeited.
Zuck did not forfeit. He called out his potential competitor who's not stepping up. He's shirking. He needs to have surgery. He's got something on his schedule. Some spaceship's going to blow up. So he's dragging his feet because he's scared.
Well, Zuckerberg's
He's
really
scared
busy
'cause
kicking your content off Meta. So
kicking his ass off the internet too. So just like he's going to do in Ring.
that's awesome.
So I'm still 100%. All of you can be against me. 100% Team Zuck.
All right.
So I'll give you. Doesn't he do like a martial arts background?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, background's
Look,
a strong term,
look,
but
we gotta do. But I gotta give a shout out to our buddy that hopefully will come on the show one day, Adrian Peters. If you ever met a South African,
I have.
It's an interesting, different breed, tough set of people. And I'm just telling you. What was that line, Greg? We can't say it. We're not going to say it, but he's got that special kind of strength. He's got that old man strength.
So
Savant.
it's the same thing.
Savant strength.
I'm just thinking about that time that South African whipped your ass.
I got the low.
Got the low.
He did not whip my ass. He did later, but I got the front on him. I got the first one, and then it got real.
Yeah. I remember.
God, we're idiots, man.
We really are.
How are we still here? Hey, here's to another show, man.
Barely survived.
Great. Thanks for being here, Ethan. Yeah. All right. Well, it's now recorded in the books. All our listeners are knowing that you're still on the wrong team, and
Got it.
And we're going to see where this goes. We need some healthy wagers.
Yeah.
We'll make sure that we get that recorded.
Mark, if you want to join our podcast, you want to come out and join us in the barn,
or Elon,
we can't. He's too busy. We already talked about this.
I don't know. I think if we tag him on this and be like, "Hey, man, it was part of the entry topic,"
all right,
we'll see where it's going to be. Look, I'll put it in the front yard. We'll put the rings up. We can have it right here.
Right next to
Hey,
where our
let's declare
inflatable
this
slide.
right now. We can declare this right now. We can settle this bet right here in front of the barn. Yep. And tickets, let's go. We'll do it quietly. No. We'll do it quietly. No recording, just for us. We'll settle the bet.
Okay.
No security required because we'll do it in a covert way.
We'll be the security.
We'll be the security.
I feel like if they won't, we just got to get some costumes, put their faces on.
The inflatable suits.
We'll run it for them.
Exactly.
All right. Well, let's get to it. J Lord, another reason Ethan's here, and kind of the first topic I wanted to get into today was one of the products that I think was announced out at Black Hat, which was CISA doing a good job of analyzing nationally what the known exploited vulnerability topography looks like, and they've now collected a machine consumable JSON data set that basically is kind of an interesting fungible piece of data that if you're in the vulnerability management space, you can consume that to influence how you dedicate your vulnerability management resources, dollars. It all comes down to my perspective as a guy that's dealt with vuln management for a long time. It's been kind of an important area. I've kind of anchored to another shout out to an old friend, Gary Thomas. He sat in my office when we hired him and was working with him. He said, if you patch your shit and secure your admin credentials, you're going to be all right. And so vuln management to me often connects a lot to how you manage hygiene in the environment. And you always get that friction in the environment of why do I need to keep this stuff current? I don't want to deal with that thing right now. I don't even have good visibility to know what I have, back to that asset management conversation we had a few weeks ago. And so this becomes a really cool evidentiary way to be able to demonstrate this is something we really need to focus on, because we know not only is it a bad vulnerability, but also that it's actively being exploited. And we have the U.S. government telling us that because they keep watch of reports nationally, which ties to a second topic we're going to talk about in terms of the SEC mandate requiring people to actually talk about breaches more, which this all kind of connects together in an interesting way. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah. I would love to check in with Gary to see if he still stands on that statement, because he was an individual contributor back then. Now he's manager responsible for all the bits and pieces. And I find that statement to be dated and slow, just like his golf game.
So Ethan, another really important part. Jay, could you do me a favor and pull up that thing? The reason why I really gravitated toward this is I really think it's cool and important to have a. We'll pull up a picture, but this is kind of funny to me. I think it's really important to be able to exercise influence operations in vulnerability management, because you always are met with like managing hygiene has a cost, and that cost often comes at a trade-off of innovation and other things that are important for the business. And so that's the wrestling match that you always end up in. And so good vuln management is about having good data about what you have, the why you need to patch it, how much of it there is, and how long it's going to take, and what it means in terms of the outcome of risk reduction you're going to get when you do it. And that's how to sell the vuln program back in. And so back in the day when Ethan and I worked together, Ethan did all the hard work, and typical of me, I did all the show pony dancing. But we got invited by our vendor at the time, was Qualys, to come out and do a talk on the thing that we had built. And Qualys at the time was largely just the sensor. The real brains behind the thing was what Ethan had built for me based on this vision that we shared together and how we wanted to build it. And this concept of exploitability or known exploit concepts were already included. I mean, the overarching vision of the thing was, at a high level, we wanted to consume information from the environment about the assets that we knew, what they were, and then start connecting in risk factors. Risk factors like it needs patches. Risk factors like it's misconfigured. Risk factors like those patches and vulnerabilities have certain severity scores based on what CVSS already presents. Then we could start tying in what threat intel did offer at the time. We didn't have KEV, but the products themselves had some level of knowledge of known exploitability based on what threat intel would monitor for. MITRE ATT&CK as it was beginning to be birthed and mature, would talk about like those first stage attacks and what vulnerabilities, which is wonderful. You see MITRE ATT&CK trying to join that now, and then KEV being another connection to the overarching kill chain. But that said, the outcome of this product, and then I'll give Ethan a chance to talk a little bit more about it because he actually built the damn thing. I just sold it. Was to have a singular dashboard that you could put in front of anyone, the business, the vuln management operator, or an executive. Is like, this is the riskiest thing in our environment. This one asset right here, because of whatever aggregation of information about missing patches, vulnerabilities, where it was presented in the environment, whatever, could actually be addressed. And so it's wonderful to see, sorry, I have to say this, 7 years later, Ethan and I were trying to get Qualys to build something like this. The CISA, which is actually kind of cool and unique, where they sit collecting information about breaches nationally and internationally, because they have a global threat intel team, to be able to start releasing output products like MITRE has with ATT&CK that can be consumed and then influence operations like this, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it'd be helpful, man. What were we thinking then about what were the inputs that we wanted this thing to connect into, and how we built it?
So you had your almost easier basics where it was all the data coming out of Qualys, your CVSS scores, your different dimensions of it, and then that fed into it in a big way. But you were also looking at how long has this thing been around on that device?
Right.
The temporal attack surface.
Right.
Because if it's only there for 5 minutes, it's not really that much of a problem compared to something that's been there longer and longer. And there's a whole science that goes around things getting exploited and how long before
That's right.
it becomes a problem, or how much more likely it is over time.
I use that line all the time of like, hey man, I don't know what to tell you. This thing's been here 3 years. And then they would turn around and say to me, like, well, it's been here 3 years and nobody's exploited it. Like, okay, you want to live with that? That door's been unlocked for 3 years. That's just a matter of time somebody walks by and gets that doorknob.
I remember we also took advantage of stuff like they actually had Intel on their devices where they had classifications for them. And so, this server is more likely to be way more sensitive than that server.
Right.
And so factor that in.
Right.
I don't care as much about something that doesn't have real data in it, that doesn't have as much access as, the actual crown jewels sit on this box.
Right.
We don't want that to have that 3-year-old vuln sitting on it.
Right.
And yeah, there was data even back then coming out of Qualys with, are there known exploits? Has it actually been weaponized? Is there known malware on it? And, that was factoring into how do you think about this?
Right.
Because you can even see back from those old scatter plots back there.
Yeah.
It's, you had 1 million vulns in the environment, or you might have, 20,000 different vulns in the environment or something like that, some ridiculous numbers. How do you get past that? Well, figure out what you need to pluck off first.
Right.
Find the highest risk. What's the worst server in your environment, or what's the worst 5 of them?
Right.
We're looking at things like attribution of who owns those also.
Right.
Which department is running that? Which one isn't doing their job with patching?
Yeah, the in-state visualization we wanted to create was a federated view. So each business line could see like a roll-up aggregate risk. And then you could use that as a grade. Like I think about my time in government. You remember John Streifert.
Yep.
Remember the iPost program?
Yes.
Like now we're talking graybeard shit. But like that's what he did. He would tie in like intrusion detection system logs, stupid stuff. Like we're seeing this many cyber attacks. They're all bullshit, but like they mean something in the fact that there's that much being launched at us. Incident reports in terms of real incident activity. And then he would connect in this kind of data about patches and vulnerabilities missing. But the beauty of what he was doing was a unified way to measure and benchmark risk. And you could argue indefinitely the algorithms are wrong. But at the end of the day, having a singular thing that said this base versus that base, you got an A and you got a C. And when the CIO looks at those two IT directors at those two places, lots of questions happen. And that naturally creates that management tension to care about hygiene more. And that was kind of the thing that you and I were trying to build to like push our business lines to do that. And I think it worked great. And then we left and they probably tore the thing down. But like that's the founder's dilemma in many ways. But I thought it was a great product and a great vision.
No, and the beauty of it, so from our role perspectives of the shit shoveler, the shit seller, and the person getting the shit
consumer.
kicked out of them, was I was able to work with the business and use this tool,
Right.
and go in and show them and sit down with the person who was the CIO or CTO, and illustrate and show them and point out what was the gold computer that you had? Was it 2003?
It was the last XP.
XP,
Yeah,
XP
put the
box.
spike through it.
Well, it's been there for 15 years. Like we know it's been there for 15 years. It's been vulnerable for 15 years. That doesn't equate what we need to do with this thing. So the impact from the operational side of it was profound by having a tool like this, a dashboard that individuals can go look at.
Right. I was just talking to an executive that's looking to hire a new CISO, and we were talking about like how the role is such an influence operations kind of role, and how do you measure and benchmark progress and success? And I told her basically this story. Told her the Streifert story. Like you have to have a way to measure and benchmark federated risk across your business lines, and you can do that in the app dev space through SAST and DAST technologies and things like that. You can do that at the infrastructure IT level through technologies like this, but you got to create something so people can have something to manage to.
Yeah.
And this gave you something as shit get counted, but you actually carried a bat. Like you need to fix this one thing because this is the thing that we all agree is the worst.
Yeah.
And it's a way to drive operational progress because of it.
Streifert thing was a long time ago. You and I went to DC when we were at a hedge fund together in 2015.
That was quite a trip.
That was quite a trip. I think I fell asleep.
I'm glad I'm still alive.
Yeah, me too.
Again.
And, we went down asking for this data from what CISA is now, saying like, hey, how can we get this information?
That's right.
How can we share this information with you?
Bruh.
And then
this is way more fun
This
now.
is 2017.
This is 2017 we were doing this. Yeah. 2015 we were doing that.
2015 we were doing that. And we have the same situation we're in now. Like we don't have easy access to that.
Right. Well, it's still like, that's why CISA created this, like, because they know everyone's doing that. And what's interesting, and this is kind of the poke to the industry, and I know there's a lot of products out there that
I would never do that.
claim to, it's okay. Like they come in and show us how it works, and that show me the customer that's actually doing the thing that we built, right? Like show me someone that's taking your product and do that. But like I haven't seen it. Like Ethan and I met the heads of product for Qualys, showed them this, like this is what we want the product to be. Like go do that. That didn't work. Then I the asset inventory thing. I tried to. That's a whole nother story. We built a product. I don't know if did you contribute to the asset management, asset discovery thing, the meta inventory thing?
I think I had sort of the first version of it because it was.
Oh, you
we
were
didn't
the
have one until this stuff.
You were the
actually
guy
came
digging
along.
the thing
Yeah,
up,
yeah.
and then Mylan and all those guys got involved, and we actually had Qualys. They were going to buy it. They were going to pay us money for it, and it got tangled between our the head.
Business got in the way of securing
Finance
the organization.
organizations don't know how to sell technology they've built internally to technology organizations. It just turned into a mess. So But anyway, it's interesting that like there's a lot. I guess the punchline I'd hope like our industry partners would listen to in this, if they're listening, is that tons of innovation happens in your customer populations. And if you build those relationships well, and if you listen, there's an opportunity to steal their IP and turn your product into something that's transportable other places, or buy it if they can figure out the lawyers how to do it.
Yes. Use the intelligence that's happening on the ground and bring that up and make it into a sellable product.
I mean, like, look, I everyone knows I worked at Attack IQ for 2 years, and I was head of customer success, and that was my number one job. Like, find people that are using the product well, and everything that I came up with largely was 10% my vision of what I wanted out of automated testing. The other 90% was what I learned from people and their ideas, how they wanted to take advantage of like the KEV framework, the MITRE ATT&CK framework, and bringing it all together to help automate. Like, here's our security posture. It all comes down to like, I need measurable metrics to show what I'm exposed to, so I know how to spend my money on, what I need to deal with architecturally or infrastructure wise, and or where's the thing going directionally with the company. And like those all become the CISO's things to do, right? Like,
and I don't want to spoil the future part of the show, but it's those things. It's the prioritization of those things,
right?
And having the actionable data to be able to make those decisions and where to go change. When we were together at hedge fund, one of the big things that we would always, our boss would say, get shit done, right?
Yeah.
And it was being able to find and define where we needed to do those things to move the needle.
Yeah.
And we were very efficient and at executing those things once we were able to see them. And that's the important part that people that are in the industry now need to. You need that data. You need to be able to sell it, and you need to be able to do it and run that wagon with.
And that's at the principal level. That's the thing I've tried to carry with me through my career in different places that I've been now is like, this becomes inarguable. This graphic right here, when you walk in and say, what do we need to be doing, Chris? Like, what does this new vulnerability on CNN mean? Don't mean shit. Like, that's the worst thing in the environment. That's what we need to be cleaning up. S&P v2 in the environment is the worst thing. That's a problem, and we're going to put it in the queue. But if it's all hands on deck right now, it's that.
Sure.
And here's why. And here's the data behind it. And here's how we unpack that. And like the innovation that comes with that, I'm glad to see CISA listening to its customer population and its maturity to be able to articulate and offer products back that can be consumed for this. I just hope industry continues to listen and tries to take some of these ideas and like, boy, wouldn't this be great? Wouldn't it be great if we just had this thing that Ethan and I tried to build 6 years ago?
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember getting in the elevator one day with Kochak, and Rich got on the elevator at the same time, and the thing that was on C-SPAN that morning or whatever was some vulnerability. And like the last thing that you want on a Tuesday morning at 7:30 is getting on the elevator with the chief security officer and him saying like, well, what are we going to do about this vulnerability?
Yeah.
You can't say the same fucking thing we do with every single one of them because it doesn't sound great. It's not a good soundbite, but like we had a machine to go take care of these things to figure out where our risks were.
Yeah.
And we had the partnership with the tech department to be able to go and run an emergency play to do that patching. And it wasn't just Microsoft Tuesday is coming out. Like we're going to have to do patches again. And in 3 months from now, we might hit 20% of the population. We had a machine to be able to go do those things.
Yeah.
And building and defining those was because you guys built stuff like this.
Yeah. Like, look, I'll tell that story a lot differently. My conversation with that guy was like, how many do we have? And like you remember this, and our good friend Wyndham remembers this. We need to get him on one day. Like, how many do we have, Chris? Well, my last count about 500,000, and like his face would turn white. We have 500,000 vulnerabilities. I'm like, yes, but you need to understand, like this is a game of continuous hygiene, and there's things that can age off here. And explaining this machine that you're talking about is how we got him over the ledge, especially in his role because he was new to like what it meant to be operational like that and have to deal with like IT infrastructure and stuff. He had never, sat at that kind of helm before. And so that was the like, yes, there's a lot here, but there's a life cycle to dealing with this stuff. And it comes in months and over months. Like there's a process called patching that happens, and it takes 30 to 45 days for that thing to run its thing. And when it's done, there's a 10% that we got to go clean up. And if that's, residual, whatever that is, or if we exclude certain things because the business doesn't want to deal with it right now, that's the things you need to engage on. Because now we're talking about not letting the natural process of, think of patching as like running through the bushes, getting scratches on your legs. They will heal until they get infected. And so, we want the natural process to work until we need you. You're the medicine. And so this became the escalation point and things like that. So it's interesting, like we have this talk, it's 2023, and like this natural infrastructure management, security management, even in modern Kubernetes environments and cloud delivered infrastructure, still is a thing I find myself grappling with wherever I go. Like what is the hygiene patch management pinning process for how we're going to keep our images current? I don't know. Like haven't really thought that through yet. That's a lot of work. It's no different, man.
Yeah.
It's easier. The cloud now your infrastructure can flourish faster in a bad way. Like it doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
But the tools like this help. Like now all of a sudden you can like track what is the worst and whatnot.
Yeah. And a lot of people think that this is
or KEV can help too.
Yeah.
That's what I mean.
This is we're updating our firewalls. We're updating our Microsoft endpoints, right? Those aren't always the things that we're concerned about. Java libraries, like how many hundreds of those did we have?
Yeah.
Notepad++. At one point, Brucey W. and I went and that system that we had for users to be able to download software.
Yeah.
We basically drew a line in the sand and said, hey, anything downloaded before 2 years ago, and we deleted all of it overnight.
Totally.
And
how many binaries were connected to old software they needed?
No one ever called us and was like, wait, where'd this go? Just like, boom, we got rid of 10 years worth of stuff.
Yeah.
And just deleted it.
Yeah.
And then everyone was forced to go download the more current version.
Right.
And, but those were things that made this eye chart look horrible with like red things like, oh, we have all these. No, go update your shit. Right. And no, you can't have access to this anymore.
Right.
And if someone had come to us and was like, I need this version of Java JDE for an update to do this thing, like, sure, I would have approved it. But like, why does it need to sit there? Why does anyone be able to go download and run a 7-year-old product with 100,000 exploits?
Is like to put a capstone on this particular part of the talk for me is that hygiene continues to be a struggle for operational security practitioners, right? And it's because how the business operates, and the release of KEV is just another weapon in the quiver to help you focus the business's attention on a thing that they view as a tax, like this tech debt thing I don't want to deal with. I want to go make money over here with this new thing, and like this helps expose risk in a different way by adding more valuable machine consumable data about like this thing's exploitable now. It's being exploited in the wild. If it gets in here, it's going to get us. And that those punchlines are grabby. Those are hard to escape. Sure. I think that's really cool.
But the snarky Jason is that's great. You have another arrow, and the KEV is a great tool. Right. But if you're using that broadhead to go fish for minnows, right, or to shoot a whale shark, it's not going to work.
That's why it's the red dot, man. The one red dot on the far right. Like, we're not asking you to deal with the whole swath. We want you to focus on the left half of the equation today.
Yeah.
And then the bar progressively moves to the left over time.
Yes. But the Ethans of the organization, no offense.
At the time.
Are going to understand and be able to do that.
Yeah.
But they need the rest of the chain of command in sync with that thing, knowing and understanding the tool. They don't need to spend time in KEV. They just need to know that, hey, my person is bringing me something. This is actionable. We need to go do this, and I need to put my commitment and my money behind it so that we're securing and the organization.
This is, and I think the like that's a really good point. By the way, like in terms of what you're describing about machine, this is a machine thing.
Yes.
Like that was my job. Like I went to Richard and the executive team and like, this is how we're going to do this. And this is the data we're going to use. And then we'll go to the business, explain to them, because the business is actually the tough ones because they're going to challenge that logic. They're going to want, especially in organizations that have, a culture that enables that, right? So you got to convince them this is the right way to do it. And that becomes irrefutable. Why is CISA credible? Well, they're the national incident response center. They know what's happening in the world based on requirements to report, right? So that's really helpful. You talk about outcomes. Can we go back to the video for a second? I don't want, like, for our listeners, we'll share. I'll send you. Believe it or not, this 2017 video is still out there. It's kind of fun to watch for all the 17 people that I think came to the talk at the time, and whatnot. But like, there's a slide that shows the outcome. I actually characterized what this program did for us.
Yep. So just real quick, Kennedy acknowledged that his importance. And
You gotta get a better sound for that. It's like a fart
was that
sound.
not enough?
Something.
You need like crowd, like Alabama crowd cheering.
An Alabama game.
All right, the video. Your 7-year-old video.
No, I just want to go to the picture. There's a picture I want to show. So I think you cut this out, or this is the pause. So just scroll to the right, down at the bottom. And this is in Vimeo, by the way. How funny is that?
Oh yeah.
Scroll. I took it to Qualis. There it is. Boom. All right. So this was my kill shot that I created.
Greg, we cannot edit that out because that was a masterpiece right there.
But we started building. Ethan and I started building this program where we focused first and foremost on just re-baselining our visibility, understanding what vulnerabilities we had, but then we started overlaying this metadata about the risk posture, whether it be what we knew about the asset, what we knew about the vulnerability itself, or its exploitability. And that's the arc curve in the reduction in known vulnerability that we had in the environment. And that little circle was in 2017. It was Eternal Blue, and that thing happened. We got a tipper. Because we had worked this machine so well. We had the business.
You said tipper.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, telling my age again. Like, my beard's getting more gray, you can see there. But we got notified about this activity. We were able to execute the rapid patch play because we had to run it a few times through this process of getting better at it. And we actually were hardened up before we actually saw real Eternal Blue attacks coming through. And 2017, that was pretty damn meaningful, considering the speed of remember how Eternal Blue happened. That was a defense contractor that was creating offensive exploits that spilled them. And within days, they were weaponized and being launched, right? I watch your eyes a lot. And
It's you're doing there's so much behind that. Anyways, the positions we've held, the things that we've done, it's just...
This is a fun story, though. And I'm glad Ethan's here to share it with us because, literally, for everyone here, Kennedy's not that smart. What Kennedy's really smart at is, finding guys like Ethan to, help him out. And take the things these are the things I want to do. He's like, yeah, let's do that. That's really cool. And he built all this shit. I just get to tell the story about how awesome it was.
No, and that's an excellent point, and a point I was going to bring up for people that are out there listening. If you're junior in your career, find that thing, take it to your management, and I want your input into that. And if you're a senior person in the organization, you should be mentoring and developing the young people that are doing that. So for me, obviously we've known each other for 8 years. To see your arc is amazing, right? To see where you came from, the amount of passion that you had, and dedication, and then see where you're at today is great. But as a young person that wants to capture a thing, it's not easy to go to Chris Kennedy and be like, hey, boss, I've got an idea for this fucking thing, but I know I have a whole workload to do, but this is something that I'm passionate about.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Yeah.
How did you go about doing that?
Oh, part of it's the, starting to build those skills at buttering people up and convincing them to let you do what you know is the right thing to do.
Influence ops, baby.
And learn to do it better and better. But, also having someone who's willing to give you the chance.
Common vision.
Yeah.
I think that's the piece. Yep.
Show real progress over time. You don't have the moonshot where it's all done. Bit by bit, you can make it better.
Yep.
Even what you were talking about, just getting the numbers. I remember the numbers were a shit show for a while.
It's
and it was
how are there so many? What do we do? There's too many of them. I created
a dashboard that just said, he said he wants exactly these numbers. Here's a screen that just puts them up.
Yeah.
And it was like a bar graph with 4 bars.
Yeah.
That's exactly what he wanted at first.
Yeah.
And it's all right. Now let's teach him, the next phase of it. And, you smoothed over a lot of it, but it was also me just grabbing that understanding from you of it really is like that dumb representation that'll get us by for a while.
Yeah.
And then just working together to get those
Fake
phases.
it. Like not
Yeah.
faking it, but like this is good enough to scratch the itch that these guys are looking for.
Right.
So, and then we go build the thing that needs to be done.
A big piece of this though was also it was pulling folks like your team, folks like Gary, and when it was time to actually get the algorithm into a good spot.
Yeah.
Actually staring at what was coming out of it and tuning it carefully.
Yeah.
And not just me saying it's good, but finding folks that were were more senior to me and having them stare at it and having them criticize it and tell me, no, this is this should be higher, this should be lower. So by the time it's hardened and matured, I'll let you take over.
No, that's a good.
Yeah.
That's a very important principle. Like, don't as a mentee and a mentor, like don't let things get baked in solitude, right? You got to triangulate them. One, expressing the idea in a good way, so other people can have input to it, builds buy-in. So now I got it. Like, how many guys like you early in your career show up as like young developer? I got to go build the thing and make it awesome, and like I'm not going to let anybody see or know or poke at it because my ego can't take it. Or because I don't want to deal with their input because I got my own vision. But the reality is like your ability to like work amongst a team, get triangulated input was how we built credibility for this thing to actually work for the period that it did.
And then that gave me all the knowledge around it.
That's right.
I didn't have at first.
And the relationships. So when we started using the thing, the people that were like, oh, that makes sense, turn that knob down a little bit now that we're seeing what we're seeing.
I remember when I left, remember Justin was doing a lot of the SOC stuff at that time?
Mm-hmm.
He was starting to use the output of this thing.
Mm-hmm.
He was mashing it up with alerts he was getting.
Mm-hmm.
That was the era of alert fatigue really, setting in.
Yep.
He wanted to figure out, what are the highest risk assets where things are going off.
Yep. Yep.
And so, once you get good data that you can actually use for good things, like the possibilities, the combinations, they get more powerful.
Yeah.
It's
It's
one of those lessons of, but it starts with actually doing the hard work to know that what you have is good quality.
That's right.
Which goes back to that parallel of, things like asset inventory and how do you know how good quality is that data? Yep. And a lot of the other things fall out of that.
Yeah, makes sense to me. So there's another part of this I want to get to, and then we'll get to other topics. This is going to be a good show today. Shout out to Nucleus. Pat Garrity did some cool visualization work. I think Jen Easterly, Snap for an edit. Greg, like we want to make sure this. Jen Easterly was promoting this on LinkedIn. I thought this was really cool. Yeah. The visualization work that Pat did shows of the data that is presented out of CISO's KEV is now actually attributed to specific vendors. So now this changes the lens about who do I need to go talk to, because this often comes down to what is the biggest vulnerability I have and who's the owner of the systems in my environment that I have to hold accountable to getting that dealt with. And so 20% of the KEV as presented here is Microsoft related, and that fractionalizes into like cloud pieces, Exchange server being the biggest part. So if you're still running on-prem exchanges, that's kind of interesting. But that being said, this is a wonderful way to like tie in what we were talking about in the John Streifert model, the iPost model of owners of these platforms, and then connected vulnerabilities. Here's your risk posture already out of the box. Like, here's your vulnerabilities, here's the known exploited vulnerabilities. Connect those two things. Here's your biggest problems. And who's got the biggest problem set? Now these people can have conversations about hygiene dialogue and hygiene budgets because of this very simple thing. Very cool, very powerful, very useful. I hope the product industry starts weaponizing this and consuming this information so those kinds of visualizations can come out.
Yeah, when I saw this first, when Jen posted it, and by the way, Jen, whenever you want to come up and join Chris and I here in Studio A in Connecticut, you're welcome.
We're serious about that.
That's serious.
We would absolutely love, like, there's a story, Jen, you and I haven't talked about from my time at Northrop Grumman and my commitment to Homeland Security, and I was going to come be your program manager many, many years ago, and instead came to Connecticut and hired Jason. But needless to say, what you're doing, your mission's still very near and dear to me. Yeah. And would love very much to have some representation here on our cast for you.
Yeah, great. No, I mean, great diatribe. I appreciate it. When I first saw this, the like Office and Office Notepad piece of it,
yeah,
seeing those both as like as a one, my first thought was I would love to see, get a genie in a bottle and be like, I want to see the same thing 20 years ago.
Yeah,
and just like like that would be half of this chart, right?
Yeah.
And so the evolution of the product space, and then you look down the list, like Confluence, like how much they've done in the last decade.
Yeah.
And seeing where these things have tightened up over time.
Yeah.
Obviously allows other things to come onto the list in a bad way.
Yeah.
But also like seeing how much companies have invested into the security of these platforms, how quickly they patch things, how quickly they get it out.
Totally.
Is amazing.
I see where you're going with that. Like KEV over time is going to be a third-party risk management tool,
Could be a movie.
right? Like who is the company that is working hard to drive their exploited vulnerability down, and what does that mean about how they operate and what it means for your potential inherited risk and exposure, right? Like think about cyber GRX and organizations that security scorecard and those guys. Like anybody that can consume this information and then connect that, I'm sure they're already thinking about that. If not, I hope, there's your next brilliant idea for your 2024 evolution of your product, like consume KEV and then start branding companies by how they're managing their exploitable vulnerability and tie that in as a risk factor for what it means to do business with that company.
Yeah. It needs to be an industry verb, right?
Yeah.
Just like we've gone through with, RSS, right? From one of our comments from a couple weeks ago, it's just like, why doesn't this exist? Why isn't this a thing? This needs to be a thing.
Yeah.
This needs to be a thing that every product out there that is in the space is plugging. Like, hey, we have easy integration, like easy visualization. We've got all the KEV right behind it.
Yep.
You're looking at one thing, not pulling up 9 dashboards to try to figure it out.
Right.
And I'm not a believer in silver bullets or single pane of glass, but like the industry can help the operators get this done.
Totally. And my point very much is that there's lots of different industry components that can, like you're your Qualys, your operational consumers of vulnerability management, infrastructure and vulnerability management. But then I already see the third party tie into this. I see the adversarial pen testing part of this, and the breach and attack simulation, all that, all can take advantage of this kind of stuff. Your most exploited vulnerabilities should be the tipping point of your kill chain activity, right?
You're gonna laugh. I remember talking to the folks over at KEV-SEC-CISO. It was like 2 or 3 years ago, and they take me through their dog and pony show. They show me everything, and then I turn to them and I say, "Okay, do you have something that just shows me who out of like all the devs checking code in checks in the worst code?"
Oh yeah,
And
totally.
They're like, "Oh, we don't have that."
Like, but that's
And I'm like, but that's what I want to know. That's who I need to fix first.
That's your security problem in your software development lifecycle. Like the guy that's checking like quality standards on code check-in and error rates and things like that are like critical to good software management.
And you have the data. It's just you need to
gotta
actually
do
have
it.
that vision and actually push on that stuff.
That's right. And like,
Sorry, devs.
no, like they
Someone
get
gets
it.
me now.
They like no, be a good dev. I mean, that's like follow security standards.
We make this joke a lot, but it's idiocracy, right? It's just it's a different sequel or prequel to that movie.
Water like out the toilet.
Yeah, so, exactly. Secure code. Like,
You guys have probably seen over the years when you actually take the time to pull someone aside, actually explain why something matters. That it's a big deal. Here's how big a deal. Here's the pattern.
Right.
Most people are pretty rational.
Yeah.
Like you have crazies that are out there, but most people they want to have a long career.
Totally.
They don't want to just brush you off.
They want to do the right thing.
They want to exactly.
But security's on the other side of a manager that's asking for product. It's asking for something to come out, right? And so that's the tension. And so you often have to go explain to them so they can defend themselves. And again, the plight of the CISO or the security sales guy is like, I've got to influence everybody to do this thing that nobody wants to do because it's a tax, or it's actually not a tax. It's part of the responsibility of owning technology, but often that's how it's realized, and that's what you have to sell.
yeah, shout out to my favorite IL diagnosis partner, JB, on that exact same thing, Ethan.
It's funny. I haven't thought about him in a long time. It's cool. Hopefully he'll listen.
Yeah, he commented on our last post.
Oh, that's awesome. All right, let's take a break from this one.
Yeah.
We probably need a round of drinks. I got an idea, Greg. Man, this guy's got more power and passion in his voice than any upstart I've ever seen.
Which one? This one?
It's Oliver Anthony, not that one. Let's go for Oliver Anthony, Richmond, north of Richmond. That's the song. There he is, Richmond, North. That one right there. Will this get recorded if he's playing
I've
it?
been selling my soul.
I'm hearing it in my ears. Can I hear it?
Working all day.
Check this guy out.
Overtime hours for bullshit pay, so I can sit out here and waste my life away. Drag back home and drown my troubles away. It's a damn shame what the world's gotten to for people like me, people like you. Wish I could just wake up and it not be true, but it is. Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Living in the new
Pilsner.
world with an whole soul. These rich men north of Richmond, Lord knows they all just wanna have total control.
This is fucking great, by the way. Like I'm fucking pumped. That was a good talk. That flowed well. Video looked good on your side, I think. Woo!
The other one.
What do you think, E? What do you think about that guy?
Love it.
God, crazy, man. Like that, and who's that guy? Nobody. This is a YouTube star. I just hope everybody watching this and those other 3 million people that have watched this in the last 2 weeks go and find a way to promote that guy. You know, like make him famous. Hopefully he'll stay true to his roots and his stories. And I hope there's 20 more songs. He's got another song too that's almost as good, but that one that requires a drink, Jay.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, then I want to do a blind reaction for you. So this is a local brewery, beer brewery.
That's brown liquor.
I know. So this is going to confuse the hell out of you, fucking Tennessee.
Two Roads, workers' comp. He's talking about
Yeah,
the working
workers'
man.
strife. Yeah, exactly. So I
Working
saw
his
this.
ass off.
I
This
saw
looks
this
really
and thought of
good.
you. Like we've shared a lot of different varieties of the Two Roads stuff. Plug Two Roads.
That's right.
Just in case you want to
Two Roads,
sponsor us,
come down and
local Wilton boys.
like talk about social lubricant in contributing.
Yeah,
It's actually got a really clean smell.
it should.
Really good. E,
Yeah.
check it out. All right, let's try this out. Like that was a fancy way, like
Yeah.
wine guys swirl it
Yeah.
around. Like
Went over way better than our last wine tasting dinner that we had. You got us in a lot of trouble for.
no, I got us in a lot of trouble. That and our friend from India who got in a lot of trouble too. That was kind of funny.
Yeah,
All right, well, let's try this out. See how it goes.
absolutely. Gentlemen,
To Richmond, north of Richmond.
that's extremely smooth.
That's
light. Yeah,
It's really light.
yeah, very light.
Maybe because we cut it with that melted ice because it's 120 damn degrees in Connecticut.
Yeah,
Well, that's doable. A lot of pepper in the back at the end.
it does. Yeah, it's got a nice little sweet heat on it.
Ooh, that's really sweet too. That's really good.
It's interesting.
Farmhouse American whiskey.
The third of a dram that you gave me, I'll top up a
Well,
little
as a
bit more.
taste,
so
you
I
know,
have-
you're welcome to.
so I can
I didn't know if you were going to throw it out the window or pound it. You know.
make it through you talking for another hour. All right.
Well, if you got something interesting to say, Jay, all you do is get in.
All right.
All right. So Anthony Oliver, y'all go see him.
Anthony Oliver.
Next topic was we're going to do the SEC thing, right? The new SEC rule.
Yeah.
Let's pull that up real quick so we can talk about it. So the essence of it, as I understand it, is that it's an evolution of an existing rule that requires every of 12,000 publicly traded companies that are out there. They have to, within 24 hours of identifying materiality of an incident, they have to file a report of that they had an incident. That's big part one. What is materiality, and when does an organization know that? That's funny. I'm going to talk about this part two. Ogden and Deacon, Ogletree and Deacons. The other part of it is that within 48 or 4 days, I can't remember. I'll have to go look. If you're a public reporting organization, you have to file an 8K report.
Yep.
And basically, like that's basically an assumption that you're going to have some form of massive revenue change because of a thing. So there's a substantiality to that report that historically has not been there in the form of the accountability as a publicly traded company. So if you're a publicly traded company as a CISO, defining materiality and being prepared to do some 8Ks when you have a breach, and what that means for the CEO and the board and all of that is a BFD.
So what about organizations that don't have a CISO that are just running MSSP?
Well,
What are they going to do?
that's wonderful, right? Like they're going to do what they've always done. They don't have to do anything, right? They have to do what they have to do under what fiduciary regulatory responsibility that they do fall under. But this only applies to publicly traded because of the economic impacts of being publicly traded and the opportunities that come with that, right? Isn't that what that means?
Yeah,
You're a big company, you have big influence in the economy, SEC's focused there. This is how they prioritize. What do you think this is going to do, though? Like, what does this change?
Nothing. Answer to both of your questions. So not to make a joke, but the California privacy law for intentionally withholding information is a $7,500 fine.
Right.
Right. So I'm a publicly traded company. What do I care?
Right.
Because notifying of this could impact my share price far more significantly than some modest fine.
So what is this? Is this like the Uber, breach materializing in the form of an SEC finding now? Is that where this is coming from?
Absolutely. So again, 5 years later to come around and say, hey, now we have a requirement for every publicly traded company. But I need to know what's under the hood of this. Wait, where are people going to do the notifications? Where's the teeth for not doing the notifications? And what are we going to see for the first couple companies, like big companies that do a notification of this? Like, how's that going to impact their stock? How's it going to impact their board? If they have a CISO, is that person just going to get fired and they're going to go pick up a new person overnight? And then how's that going to impact like our industry and our side of it? Like, is this just another, scapegoat, the security guy thing? Or is this going to be a meaningful thing? Having worked a bunch of breach notifications and seen companies refuse to follow state laws and just take a fine, 18 months later, it just gets, bylined in the Wall Street Journal or the WAPO, and no one cares about it.
Yeah.
It just goes away.
Yeah. So the outcomes are really important here. I think that's interesting. I respectfully disagree a little bit in that I think when your incident response, when materiality is figured out, and you're now filing 8Ks to the SEC, that's an invitation for the government and the maturity of organizations like the CISA and others to start getting involved in your business. And so our next topic, we're going to actually talk about a very interesting Brian Krebs article about the maturity of the CISO and where that person stands in the hierarchy of the organization. And I think it's like if you haven't invested well in security leadership and dealing with and navigating through an incident response, and now all of a sudden you got the SEC crawling up your rear end because you had to file an AK because you lost a bunch of PII, that's going to change, I think, how the board thinks about who should be leading security and how important it is in the organization. So it's a material step. That said, until there's real outcomes that come from it, it's just another thing to do.
How is the SEC going to find this? Are they going to rely on people filing this? Are they going to pull trading licenses? Are they going to delist companies from the whatever stock exchange they're in?
That's what I mean.
Right? Or are they going to ask a question during an SEC audit?
It's a typically American thing. It's a trap. You're allowed to do whatever you want to go make money. That's enterprise commerce is what we want to encourage in our free market economy until you fuck up.
Yeah.
And then we're all over you, right? And then it's only until those things happen and this thing actually gets exercised. It's like law, right? Like law and then case law, right? Here's the thing you shouldn't do versus when this thing happened historically in the judicial system, we punished them this way. And we let the judges sort that out. And so until the judges sort this out, this is just another thing to do.
Sure. And ignorance of the law is not acceptable.
No.
Defense, right?
No, of course not.
I just did a 2-week consulting gig helping someone out about GDPR compliance, where when I sat down with the outside counsel, they were like, yeah,
Don't care. Yeah. Well, were they publicly traded though? Back to your first point, like
Yes.
this doesn't even matter anyway. They
So
were.
publicly traded company in the EU, and they said, "Hey, I rather just pay the fine over the next year versus going and dropping $8 million to go build this platform."
Right.
So,
Right. Well, that's risk trade-off, right? Like I'll suffer the fine. Like, so unless the SEC gets serious of like, no, we're not going to tolerate this anymore. We're going to delist you, or there's going to be a financial penalty that's going to be meaningful enough to affect your business. Yeah. It's just, again, just another thing to do. Just another report you got to put in, you have to deal with. And so will security ever be, from the big picture perspective, a respected thing that you actually care about, and like caring about not losing your customers' data, not losing your intellectual property, or will it continue to be a factored risk of ruin and loss? And we'll deal with it when that day comes.
yeah.
And those are strategies. Those are different strategies.
So
I hate to say this, but part of what's resonating for me is you're going to actually see, just if anything, when those penalties are big enough and high enough, just more partnership with the legal side to be ready, like even faster to respond, to just assess, does this actually cross that line? How do we fight the materiality side of it?
That's
And
really interesting.
How do we, figure out below or above that bar?
Yeah. Well, so Google, new SEC cybersecurity rule, and the first 20 articles you read are from lawyers or from legal teams. It makes sense as a regulatory rule that the lawyers would be influencing that. But there's so much ambiguity. It's yet another highly ambiguous rule with like this materiality thing in it. And the only thing that's definitive is that you got to do it. You have to define materiality. And then it affects like the reporting structure and having to use the 8K now. So that's a more meaningful kind of report that you have to file.
When you have an incident with a global company, it's one of the first things you're doing is pulling in the legal folks. 'Cause
Totally.
They need to figure out what does that mean legally and do damage control. And if it's a global company, what are the laws here and there, and where are they all apply to this?
Yeah.
Because it turns into a huge mess there. It's not just one lawyer or one bar or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, we talked about lawyers earlier interfering with trying to create a product and sell it. So, like, imagine what that's like in the middle of an incident. But you're exactly right in that. Obviously, in the middle of an incident response scenario, what are my disclosure requirements are very, very important things to be contemplating, and it's usually your legal team that's responsible for that. And so now the legal team has got one tool taken away from them. Do I have to disclose this or not? Like, disclosure requirements are there. However, here's another tool to work with: define materiality. And actually, I may have to report under some other auspice, but I don't at least have to do an SEC filing unless I define it as material. And so CISO ain't even going to make that decision anymore. That's the cool part. Like, something happened. Here's what I know. Here's the business impact. Here's the thing. Is it material? Who's going to decide that?
again, and just the snarky Jason, like
Doesn't matter.
the
This is
CISO
all
is going to
bullshit.
take the brunt of that impact. It's not their call. They're going to be the person saying, hey, we have a material risk, and here's what the rule is.
I disagree wholly there. This is how I'm going to play my cards. Like, I get the job. Like, I'm in there. I'm like, this thing just happened. Here's the business impact as I understand it. Who's responsible for defining if this is material or not? I'm not the business leader to define that. I'm the security guy to expose risk and threat.
Yeah.
This threat just exploited us. This is what we know happened. Who's the business leader say that? Like, who's the lawyer and the business person that suffered the loss?
Sure.
To say
but it happened on your watch. And
that's not, you can fire me for
it's
it
material.
happened.
Yeah.
I didn't expose the right risk, but the requirement for defining materiality, which defines
But the general counsel or the chief legal officer is probably not the person who's going to get fired, but the CISO is.
Totally.
Is all I'm saying.
But you're talking two different things. You get fired for letting it happen. Who's the person that says this thing is actually reportable and we're going to take the hit because of the materiality impacts from an 8K reporting standpoint? Like, I've actually got to go to the SEC. And that's like the reason why I'm beating this drum is that this is a thing that happens a lot in the broader CISO community, where you're not empowered as the CISO to manage business risk. You're empowered to expose and help management manage it. And so influence operations, again, Ethan, what we're talking about. So my position and posture on this is, in these scenarios, you need to have that negotiation. This talk needs to be happening now. When this happens, who defines material? It ain't me. I'm an input, based on scope, scale, and impact. But I'm not the decider on if it's got to go.
Yeah.
I probably shouldn't even be the guy interfacing with the SEC.
Exactly. So legal or chief risk officers for organizations that have those.
Right.
And so put a pin in that for a second. I'm just going to, one last quip before we move on.
Yeah.
Is I think this goes back to our last conversation of the commission's study for all of this was breaches between 2011 and 2018.
Yeah. So what the nature of those breaches?
Has significantly changed, materially changed. And the vulnerabilities have changed. The impact of those have changed. And just think of ransomware between 2018 and now, how much that's changed, how many businesses, government, local organizations have been impacted by all of that, to include publicly traded companies that probably none of us know anything about unless we were working on a breach as an incident responder for one of those. And then think about how many material non-public information things that you and I have worked on, how many pen tests that we've seen, material findings on. Does that need to be disclosed to the SEC now? Findings of grave things from vendors that are globally deployed, that are publicly traded companies, so there's a lot to be done here, and I will give them this is a step forward, maybe a step in the right direction.
So we agree on that.
But there's a lot of work that needs to be done here. There needs to be teeth, and there needs to be an understanding from the boards or the executive teams that this is important, and we need to be committed to our legal security risk teams to make sure that we know, understand, and we're notifying these in a quality, timely way.
We should probably get right to the KREVs article because it literally that point leads right to it. What were the metrics? It was really good that were in there. 3 out of Fortune 100 companies, 3 of them actually have CISOs that are recognized,
5.
and they're 5. Sorry, thanks.
So here's
read them out.
Here's what you're alluding to. So, Krebs put out an article,
July 22nd.
And so he's saying hey, where's CISO representation in the boardroom? And so the statistics that he put was out of the Fortune 100, 5 companies, Best Buy, Cigna, Coca-Cola, Disney, and Walmart, have a CISO that have board representation out of the top 100 Fortune 100 companies.
Yeah. Is that board representation, or is that leadership recognized on their public website? And I don't know if there's a difference.
Yeah.
I could see how but I can see putting the CISO's face on the website's a lot easier to do than getting them usefully contributing to the boardroom.
Yeah.
One's look, we got a CISO. The other's okay, CISO, what do you got for us? And do I have someone sophisticated enough to actually offer something?
Okay. Yeah.
Anyway.
So I guess the nuanced question that you asked is the way that Krebs frames it in this article is recognized CISOs. So I don't know if that means that they have board seats or if it's just they're on their public profiles.
Right. I think those are those are real too.
Yep.
Just because you're on the website don't mean you actually got a seat at the table.
And then it says 1/3, so around 30 something people have a chief technology officer in their executive stables. 40 listed a chief information officer, and 21 included a chief risk officer. So, initial reaction.
It's back to the SEC thing, right? SEC now says every incident requires some level of materiality. I'm counting on the CISO to prepare a defense and a response plan to deal with those kinds of things. Yet those guys probably don't have access to those very people in the boardroom who actually can most greatly influence what that means, or you're going to be point also on dealing with this thing when it happens. and you may or may not have the sophistication of the right kind of person to offer the sophistication. I had a conversation with the chief legal officer at a place recently, mentoring through like how should they're now a public organization. They're thinking about renovating their security program, how to invest, and like it's frankly them turning public, their growth and stuff like this. They're like, yeah, we need to get somebody in here that's a little more diplomatic, a little more political, able to navigate, able to help plan, help strategize, justify, and they're up leveling. And so that's why I'm tepidly optimistic about what the SEC rule means. It's not the rule. It's that there is a growing trend of pressure on publicly traded companies to do a better job. And I am personally seeing opportunities pop up from it. We'll talk about the talent market thing here in a second, which is a whole nother part of it. But that's what I see.
Sure. So 4 years ago, New York State required every public financial services organization to have a security team, a chief information security officer, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I think they phrase it as a qualified CISO also,
A qualified CISO.
which they did not define, but it means something.
Okay.
But
But, oh yeah, okay.
but
Caveats, I love them.
what organization do you think has more teeth, SEC or the state, New York State? Like if you saw ramifications coming out of something, who's gonna strike first and strike harder? To use my Cobra Kai. SEC, right?
No,
You don't agree?
it's not that I don't agree. Two different kinds of snakes, right?
Yeah.
One's small and fast. The other's one big and will strangle.
I think the state
right?
snake's got less teeth, and therefore,
Okay.
like that's not a meaningful comparison.
It could also be poisonous, whereas the SEC is big and slow and will eventually kill you, right?
Sure. SEC is going to build on case law. State can execute quickly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So like both can be deadly.
Pull your state license, stuff like that.
Also, if you see it coming, you can get the hell out of the way, and maybe you never get bit or captured by the snake in the first place.
Yeah.
No step on snake.
That's right. I got that patch. Tyranny be damned. Misspelled snake. I think that was written for a Marine, if I'm not mistaken, too.
Probably in crayon. Yeah. So like, and of course, I'm not advocating against this. I think these are both important things, right? They need to exist. But what I'm saying is the companies need to be behind this. They need to be empowering the people that are in charge of these positions. And
How do you do that when you report to the CIO?
Exactly. And that's the point that I'm getting to. As a CISO or CSO, it might not be important to have a board seat, but it needs to have access to the board, and the board needs to have access to that individual.
Yeah.
Right. But then my bigger concern is the reporting structure. Mm-hmm. Right. I've worked in several different organizations where, the CISO reports to the CSO or to the general counsel or to a CIO. And where I've worked major incidents and it goes into the CIO or a CTO organization, that's where I've seen like the worst outcomes.
Sure. Because your priorities are, first off, like in an incident scenario, you immediately work for the CLO.
Yeah,
like
everyone
that's the thing.
does.
Ethan just talked about that. Like that's everywhere. But prior to the incident,
And that incident is a hockey stick, right?
Totally.
So like day one, you go from the ground, like shoots up, everyone's involved, all hands on deck, checkbook comes out, you bring in Mandiant or, whoever you need, everything's on the table. And yeah, we're going to go buy all that equipment. And then as soon as the active incident closes, that's to me where the differentiation of who the reporting structure is changes completely. CIO, CTO, that goes into, annual planning. We'll get to these things.
Right.
There's prioritizations. Everyone has everything. Legal might be a little more prescriptive.
Yeah.
Like we're going to go do these things. Chief risk officer, yes, absolutely. We need to, button up these areas. We need to patch these holes.
well, it's different ways of influence, right? Like
Absolutely.
You work for the CIO, everything's a tech thing. and we talked about this earlier today.
And you wouldn't have tech security without tech.
Right. And that's wrong often because like business security and what the business is doing has shadow IT and tech that the CIO may or may not be responsible for. Hopefully they are, but like it's never been that way anywhere I've been. And then there's like business controls that get layered on top of tech in terms of like operational process and things like that. And so those things work together, and that's a very diplomatically challenging space. When you work for the CRO, everything's risk measured, right? So you got to have a nice framework of how you connect together, a good discovery process for risk discovery, and a good process for prioritizing impact, probability, and confidence, and all of those types of factors. You work for the legal, everything's like legally bound. Like what do we have to do for the law? And preventive arguments and investments that hopefully get you to like not legal to a not legal place can be often very difficult because they see those as investments. And so this is where the teamwork applies, right? And why you got to have a seat at the table, because legal's going to tell you, I don't want the CFO to spend money if I don't legally have to. The CIO says like, this is a tech risk or it's not a tech risk. I'm responsible for the tech side of the house. CRO wants everything wrapped up in a package about the risk modeling. And so it's a very shitty spot to be if you're under any of those people.
Absolutely. I worked in an organization where there was a CIO and a deputy CIO, and it was very difficult to prioritize security, projects that we had going.
Yep.
And there was a breach, and like both of my bosses were fired like one morning, and then like security was the number one priority. Mm-hmm. And like when those things happen, it illustrates that like security is an underpinning, or it's an add-on to all of your tech stack.
Well, it's either an underpinning or an add-on.
Yeah.
It's the right way or the wrong way.
It's rarely interwoven into it.
Yeah.
And so like, as with any knee-jerk reaction, like good things and bad things came out of it. But to me, it was just a gross exaggeration of like the importance of security and the importance of security being part of the conversation through time, right? And if those security projects had been completed as planned and under the current budget, like that incident may not have occurred. That breach wouldn't have been so bad, blah, blah, blah. Everyone would have kept their jobs.
Yeah.
But it didn't. And, it was illustrative for my role.
Ethan, when you worked in crypto, or at least, what you can discuss, like you were like a CIO too, because it's a small firm. Who did you report to?
I was actually reporting up into the legal and compliance side.
There you go.
The majority of the time there.
And was it what I described? Like, what do I legally have to do being the first question that's asked versus this is the thing that keeps us from entering the legal bound?
That environment was a little special just because of the nature of the attacks and the threats and that sort of thing. So I was able to milk that to get more, pushing and go a little harder and further with things.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a part of it. And, one of the easiest things to lean on to make improvements is the legal and the compliance side.
Yeah.
It's no, this is in writing. We're supposed to be doing this.
Yeah.
I'm going to spend the money to do it.
That's
somebody
a good
else
point.
can tell me not to.
That's a really good point. Like I have found in some places I've been, when you basically legal doesn't want to know, it's kind of a way of operating. Like, don't write that down because that can be requisitionable, right? Like, and if that ever gets found, then that would be really embarrassing for the firm. And like, I don't like, I've seen that happen. It's in the movies, shit like that happens too. So I think it's interesting. I don't think, firms do that a lot or anything like that, but it's interesting that, when you work for legal, the legal bounds of what you operate in as the security person turns into like, you often have really good traction because you are a problem discoverer. And they have legal responsibilities of once these things they have to assess and have to disclose. And so I've actually found that like they don't want you working for them because they don't want that on their desk every day, because that creates, more opportunity for them to have to do stuff that is tough to deal with. My perspective. I don't know, Jaylor, if you've experienced that. Did you work for the legal team?
I was the head of the incident response for the world's largest.
It's funny how like everyone's being
oil-based-
really careful in their words now.
Fuck it. So, working for a major oil company, reporting into their legal team, and it was awesome because they wanted to know everything and they didn't want to hear any of the bullshit, right? And so we're legally required to act on all of these things as soon as we know.
Yeah.
And everything that we found, and it was 95% of like, oh, here's the thing you brought to me. Here's the answer, like in quick time.
Yeah.
And go, and like 5% of like, okay, there's like questions within the law of like this and this, typical what you would expect lawyer stuff if you watch a lot of Suits or Lincoln Lawyer or whatever bullshit. But it's just like, okay, like we'll go deal with these things, which I thought was great. That was my single exposure. I get what you're saying. And then, like where we used to work, like I had a great working relationship with the legal team. We'd go back and forth. We had lawyers that worked within our security department, so we could go bounce stuff off of them. Was also very, very helpful. So like I like that dynamic. At Bridgewater, I also worked obviously day to day with the CTO, the deputy CTO, the CIO, and like, but that was my job, right? Of the strategy and incidents and everything. While I wasn't responsible for the incident response, working with the team that was, like, it was always me being pulled in, the business being pulled in, legal being pulled in, and like we had all of that established, for whatever was going on. So like having a symbiotic relationship with all of those teams was very, very important. My, pain has always been in working for an organization where a person has, competing priorities, whatever title they're in, and being forced to make hard judgment calls. And I've often seen security take the back page of like, oh, well, we can go do that later, right?
Right. I see that. I mean, that's really the dichotomy that I see. Like when you work when you're under the CIO or CTO and you don't have the ability to span or influence, especially in cultures where you're stifled under your hierarchy. Like, of course, you should be able to go talk to the CLO, but that can be career damaging if you go talk to the legal person, expose something that turns into a book of work for your boss to go fix something that they didn't want to fix right now. Like this is what we're talking about. So like your priorities for how you want to manage risk in the organization can be stifled by the tech organization if you work under the CIO, or can be stifled by the legal officer and their willingness to address problems. So don't bring those particular, like that materiality bar changes if you're a noisemaker. And so it's a very interesting dynamic. But I think back to the core topic of what got us here is like, that's really interesting to me that, still today, only 5 companies have like advertised like our CISO matters, which means that's telling of like security matters, but not as much as these other things. And we, put those over here because that's the thing. And that means the culture isn't permeated within the organization in a meaningful way. I think back what brought us here was the SEC thing. And I think like that pressure from the SEC is going to require more politically savvy, more organizationally connected laterally across. And I think it's going to hopefully bring an up leveling. It's like one of the things that we talked about on our riff show of like, what is the dilemma of the CISO? And like being sophisticated enough to navigate what it takes to get across all these 4 or 5 people to influence them in a meaningful way requires a special kind of person, an experience that not a lot of people have.
Yeah. And just to make another statement on Krebs's article is he goes on to say that what's the number? 88% of the Fortune 100 listed a director of human resources or chief people officer type role, and 37 included a chief marketing officer. And obviously those are core functions of businesses depending on what their focus is. And I've had a bunch of conversations over the years with people of like, oh, well, it's absolute BS that, there's, a human resources officer that's on the board or, but it's just like, there's always going to be a CFO. You're always going to have a human resources. Like there's corporate impact for those roles.
Yeah.
And these are additions, right? Not a substitution, right?
Right.
Every company needs to run itself the way that it deems. I just think a lot of boards out there need to read an article like Krebs' article and say, what are we missing?
Yeah.
And get that group of people together, to include the human resources officer, chief people officer, and the legal officer, general counsel, or whoever, and say, hey, what are our requirements? What do we need to do? What are our SEC or New York State requirements? Are we meeting those? And start planning for that, and not just be like, oh, okay, we'll go hire a virtual CISO, 1 day a week, and have our MSSP run it, 78 hours a week.
The gig economy CISO, that was a tagline that I came up with the other day as we were looking at those fractional things. I think there's something really interesting here, though. There's a whole nother thread of conversation around who's in charge of the company, how does the CEO interact with the board, how does the board oversee? And I've always said that that's where the power actually lies in most organizations as they execute is within. Like my time at the startup, the board controlled so much, because it was their investment, right? In terms of your investors as part of not your publicly traded board, but it's still a board. And so how do you educate the board on the materiality of risk that you're taking by not patching things, by ignoring tech debt, by not having a threat intel program, and the difficulty of educating and bringing them along in that story, because it's often either super technically derivative or has a cost with it that gets buried under the hierarchy you report in.
Sure, but how do you have a conversation with software developers on secure coding practices? It's the same thing.
It is.
Right? It's a different direction, but it's just as important.
But unless you're invited to the table,
exactly.
you're told, it's your job to go talk to the dev about that.
Yeah.
When are you invited to go? When has the board invited you? When has the board sought to seek education? That's, you and I know we've had this talk offline of there's a whole nother opportunity space as we, turn into further graybeards to go be board advisors, board influencers. And they pull, good ones pull people like us in and say, go look at this company. Tell us what's going on. Tell us, their maturity of their security program. Or the board is smart enough to ask for a third party to come in and do an assessment. And that's where, those consulting companies make a lot of money in doing that advisory practice. But I just wonder, in terms of Krebs' article, how much education actually lies in there, how much of that they're actually looking at, what data quality they have, and how much is being pulled versus pushed to the board. And that's what I'm hoping the SEC, this tension is going to create more pull from the board.
Yeah.
Anyway, so to capstone that, I think the story is most of us think it's until there's teeth, it's just another thing to do. That said, it may be a sign towards the right direction, and all the lawyers better start defining now what materiality means to them, because in the day of reckoning or reporting, they're going to have to figure that out pretty quick in the middle of an incident or whatnot.
Yeah. Brought to you by Brondo.
That's what plants crave.